It Takes a Community. Thank you guys for watching my presentation, even though I'm not there and I'm from afar. My ethical case study talks about it takes a community. Doing whatever it takes, examining is doing whatever it takes, really what we need to do for our students, or are there limits to actually doing whatever it takes to meet our student needs? It takes a community case study. Meet Zachariah. Zachariah is an 11-year-old boy who was diagnosed with emotionally disturbed in the 3rd grade. Zachariah lives in inner city Baltimore, where he sees violence on a constant basis. He's the oldest of 4 siblings. His mom is in and out of the streets, but she loves Zachariah dearly, and he knows this. Zachariah's story begins actually with his connection with Mr. Braxton, his counselor, who intervened in Braxton's life 3 years ago. He's helped Braxton grow so much. And from this interaction is where our case study begins. Zachariah's story. Zachariah is an 11-year-old boy at Hillside Middle School. He is supported by his mentor of 3 years, Mr. Braxton. Mr. Braxton is a 20-year-old department store worker. He met Braxton through the Big Brothers Big Sisters program and has stuck with him ever since. He works with Zachariah inside and outside the school. Over the past 2 years, he has shown Zachariah, because of his connection with Mr. Braxton, has shown major improvements in his grades, his social-emotional connections, his behaviors, and he's even been promoted out of the emotionally disturbed class program into the general ed. He's even made principal's lists one semester. Due to his major improvements, Mr. Braxton has worked with Zachariah's mother to get him into a top-performing school where Mr. Braxton's life partner works. 2 months into the year, Zachariah's mother gets incarcerated. This has devastated Zachariah and could potentially devastate his growth and progress as well as his family. Mr. Braxton immediately takes Zachariah and his siblings into his home that he shares with Mr. Hunt, who is Zachariah's math teacher and Mr. Braxton's life partner. Zachariah got into trouble in which his guardian was called. Mr. Braxton was not able to come to school and recommended that they touch bases with Mr. Hunt. Zachariah's teachers connected with Mr. Hunt, and here is where our case study gets a little interesting. See, Mr. Braxton was operating on the fact that he was taken from his parents, so he didn't even think twice about taking Zachariah in. He knew it was the right thing to do. Even though he was 21 years old, he knew that he could get temporary guardianship, in which he did over Zachariah and his siblings until their mothers served their full sentence of 21 months. See, because Mr. Braxton went through this is all he could play in his head.
Turn that down a bit, will you?
Mom, come on!
Marty, is that you?
Mom, open the door!
Rose, it's Sandra.
Oh, sorry, don't know any Sandras.
It's your social worker, Rose.
Yeah, well, you can just go and piss off.
Then we're going to have to come in, Rose.
Mom, open the flaming door!
This is breaking and entering.
Oh, We've been trying to get in touch. You haven't answered letters or phone calls.
It's fine, come on, I'm here now.
To be honest, you're not in a fit state to look after them. We've got to remove your children to a place of safety.
Oh, what are you on about? They're safe.
What's going on? Putting us into care?
Sit down! Give you, Rose!
Hey, no! That's my kid! No! Marty, stop that!
So please, 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 let me get what I want this time.
Braxton endured this as a child, and he did not want this for Zachariah. He knew as much as Zachariah improved that this could set him back if he didn't intervene. Now, Mr. Hunt's perspective. Mr. Hunt is Zachariah's teacher. He is known throughout the school for his very charismatic character and his way that he works with all the kids. Of course, there's a couple of teachers that don't really care for Mr. Hunt because he identifies as homosexual and we're in a very conservative town. But Mr. Hunt doesn't care. He allows his personality to win his kids over, and his test scores speak for themselves. He's one of the most highly effective teachers that they have at Hillside Middle School. He's worked there for the last 5 years, 3 as a TA and 2 as a teacher. With that being said, 3 as a teacher and 2 as a TA. With that being said, he also has had an experience of adoption, and he didn't want to see his student go through that.
Never mind.
Maybe they gave it to someone to hold for me.
From house to house, that's all he could think about. As a child, he also traveled from house to house, not feeling wanted, feeling abused and
That
devalued.
didn't work out too well. I keep hoping one day it'll find me.
He knew if this was going to be Zachariah's story,
But sometimes
he wouldn't make it throughout the
it's easier
system,
not to want it back at all.
nor his siblings. He knew that potentially the environments he went to could be unsafe. He could be abused.
Is this all the money I'm gonna get for you a month?
What do you want me to do? Get a job?
Watch your mouth, little boy. Your job is to be quiet and do as you're told.
He knew he had to intervene. It was the best thing for his scholar. And so,
Putting up with your pissing and crapping every time you hear a doorbell ring? That should give me some more money.
the rumor mill began. Regardless of the fact that Mr. Hunt didn't really care what others thought, it didn't stop the rumors. So when Mr. Braxton told the teacher to contact Mr. Hunt, the teacher thought this was weird. One, I think it's already unacceptable that Mr. Hunt is very flamboyant and has these relationships with all these boys. But the fact that he allows Zachariah to live with him, his student, he could potentially be maybe trying to get Zachariah to take part of that life. And not even just Zachariah, he allows Zachariah's friends, who are also his students, to spend the night. This is a concern. This is unethical. This is unacceptable, she thought. And so the rumors began. And it didn't just stop at one person. Because it was just so interesting and she had to get multiple perspectives, she wanted to check her ethics of profession with other people. The ethics of profession, like should teachers have their students in their houses? Especially if you're a male teacher and you identify as homosexual. Is it okay for you to have a male student in your house? So it transferred from one teacher in the teacher's lounge to multiple teachers, to it now being a rumor where parents were also in on the conversation and parents questioning, is this the right thing to do? And other staff members at other schools. So let's pause. Let's take a look at the ethic of profession. Through the lens of profession, should Miss Cartwright, the teacher, be reprimanded for informing other staff members of Mr. Hunt's living conditions with his student? Is Mr. Hunt crossing the line of professional expectations by allowing his student in need to stay in his home? Can we separate Mr. Hunt, the teacher, from Mr. Hunt, the caretaker, for the sake of him raising a student in need? Well, let's take this to the principal's office because she's the one that has to make the decision. So, Miss Maxwell is deciding, is this something where she knows that this Mr. Hunt is an amazing teacher and he's highly effective? So can this just be a conversation? Can she just talk to him and, get his perspective? Like maybe he's operating through the ethics of care. He really has a heart and there's no ill intent. But then she knows her community. And what if this hits the news? This could be career ending. These are all things that Miss Maxwell has to consider. So let's help her. Through the ethics of care, it's where our heart is leading. Like we take the child's best interest in mind, and sometimes it may not be just. Sometimes it may not seem always right, but it's operating with our passion in our heart for our community and for our children. So Miss Maxwell knows that child welfare services remove Black children from their parents' homes at twice the rate of white children. She also knows that in 2012, about 640,000 children spent time in the U.S. foster care system. In 2012, more than half of children entering U.S. foster care were young people of color, and 26% of children in the U.S. are in foster care that are African American, which is double the amount of actually African American children population. She knows that Zachariah has come a long ways, and it has a lot to do with Mr. Braxton, who is Mr. Hunt's life partner. It's tough because it feels like this is the right thing for him. But then we have the ethics of community. She knows her community. She knows her community is very conservative and is very non-tolerant of homosexuality, especially when it comes to those in touch and engaging with students every single day. I mean, Mr. Hunt has basically got a pass because he's so effective with kids, but now that the community knows that he has a young man in his house and that he's allowing other students to go to his house, this could be career ending. People in my community, people in her community do not tolerate this type of behavior. They're the ones who really urged the board to hire her. They knew and they trusted her to turn this school around. How does she answer her community, or how will she answer her community when it comes to the situation? The ethic of justice. Well, she went back to the policy. There was really nothing in the district policy that said anything about kids staying with their teachers. It had everything to say about not hiring people that stay in your family, but nothing about kids and teachers having their students go through, or teachers having their kids be their students. This is kind of that situation, or is it? So one thing she knows that she has to do is really reach out to her supervisor. You can't just make this decision alone. She has to bring in multiple people and really think about everything at the table. Is there a policy that she's not thinking of? Is there a policy that she's not aware of? Is she really trying to compromise morals for the sense of care? And is she allowing her community to make overarching decisions that may infringe on the best interest of kids? Well, she also has to take some other things into consideration. What is her personality type? Oftentimes, even though we do take into consideration of care, community, justice, and critique, we also have to acknowledge who we are as individuals. What does our personality type say about who we are and the decisions that we make? So knowing who she is, knowing that she wants to operate what's best for kids because that's at the center of what she does, she's forced to make a decision. Now, because we all will be eventually Miss Maxwell one day, what is the decision that you will make through the lens of professional ethics, ethics of care, ethics of community, but just downright, what's best for Zachariah? And two, what is just ethical practice for this school?